Our first speaker is Jonathan Martinez. He is going to be speaking about supported decision-making and the value of self-determination. Jonathan is the Senior Director of Law and Policy at the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University. So thank you for joining us, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Jonathan, and I have to tell you how just incredibly honored I am to be speaking at this conference, and especially after the video and panel that you just saw. The reason I'm so excited about that is because everything you need to know, and everything you are going to learn for the rest of this day, you've already learned. You have already heard the things that I think we can all agree upon. We have all heard the power and the importance of choice, not just for people with psychiatric disabilities, but the power of choice for us all. And that is the thing that I want you to take the most out of today, because that is a value that we can all share. I want you to, when we think about choice, where I want you to start is to think about your own life. I want you to think about the things in your life that are the most important to you, the rights you have that make you the proudest to be a Californian, an American, a citizen, a human being. Think about them. We don't often think about our rights, but think about them now. Think about freedom of speech and elections. Think about freedom of association. Think about the freedoms to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And ask yourself a question. Aren't those the rights that make us who we are? Aren't those the rights that make our country, America, unique in history to guarantee rights to people like that? But what do they all have in common? Choice. Every single right we have has choice in common. Freedom of speech is the right to choose what to say and what not to say. Elections are the right to choose who govern us. Life, liberty, happiness, the right to choose the kind of lives we want to live, with whom we want to live them, where and how we want to live. Choice is what makes our rights useful rather than just hypothetical. Without choice, we don't have rights. And as I said, we all can agree on that. I think that is the bedrock right and the bedrock value that we can take coming into this conference and that we must take coming out of this conference. But my honor, my job, and the people after me is to show you how those values aren't just ideas. They aren't just ideals. What they are ways to ensure that people with disabilities, specifically people with psychiatric disabilities, have the same rights as everyone else. When we read the Americans with Disabilities Act, when it says that people with disabilities have full and equal rights to be full and equal members of society, the things that we're going to talk about today are the way we can make them happen. So if we start with choice, we need to move a little bit farther from choice, because choice, the right to make choices, as I call it, is the one that empowers all our other ones. When we have choice, when we are the ones making choice, the clinicians call that self-determination. Self-determination, fancy word. What it means is making choices. When people are self-determined, they're the ones who are calling the shots. They are the ones who are the causal agents. They do things instead of having things done to them. They make choices instead of having people decide things for them. And here's what we know. Here is what we know from 40 years of science, that people with disabilities, in study after study after study, people with disabilities who have more choice, who make more choices, who are more self-determined, have better lives. We have 4 decades of studies that say for people with disabilities, those who are more self-determined, those who make more choices, are more likely to be independent, healthier, employed, involved in their communities, more likely to be healthier and be able to recognize and avoid abuse and neglect. So in my mind, choice is not just a value. Choice is not just something we hope for. Choice is something we have to make sure happens, especially for people with disabilities. And think about it. If you're at this conference today If you are a professional or a provider who works for people with disabilities, works with people with disabilities, what is on your screen is exactly what you got into this field to do. If you are a parent of someone with psychiatric disabilities, what is on your screen is what you have hoped for your child his or her entire life. And if you are a peer, what is on your screen is what you have been promised your whole life, a promise that has not been kept. People with psychiatric disabilities have far too often been segregated from society or had their choice taken away. In fact, we have 1,500 years of evidence of that. Going back to ancient Rome, I am a lawyer and a bit of a legal geek, so I can tell you, in ancient Rome, the very first time they wrote the laws down, the very first time they got all the laws together in one place, the laws that we have based our laws on is a book called the Justinian Code. I actually have a copy, and I named one of my sons Justin, which tells you everything you need to know about me. But the Justinian Code, which has all of the laws and all of the rights that gathered together in the ancient Roman nation, for the first time, one of them says, if you are feeble-minded, which was their word for people with disabilities, you had to have a curator over you to make decisions for you, to do things in your place. And that began what I call a culture that has gone on for 1,500 years, that assumes, as Tristan Scremen said earlier today, that if you have a limitation in doing something, you can't do anything, and you shouldn't be given the opportunity to do anything. That culture has followed us for 1,500 years. In Great Britain, where we got most of our laws almost word for word initially, they updated the Justinian Code. They divided people with disabilities into idiots and lunatics, their words. And they said you had to have committees over you to make decisions for you instead of you, to exercise your rights for you. And that has followed through to our country. Because as you've heard it, and as you know, if you're involved in this field, it often is our culture, the first thing we do is try to take rights away. Well-meaning, I am not here to say that people mean poorly or that they're trying to hurt people. The vast majority of people who are working with people with disabilities have the best of intentions. But what has happened from our culture is that we have created a system. In California, it's called conservatorship. In most other states, it's called guardianship, where if it worked the way it was supposed to, I'd be a fan of it. But the way conservatorship works in every state, including California, is this. If a judge decides that I am unable to exercise some or all of my rights, what that judge is supposed to do is take away the rights that I truly cannot exercise and give them to someone else, say Ellen. In that case, Ellen becomes my conservator and is empowered and required by California law to work with me to maximize my decision-making and help me become more independent. And again, if it worked that way, I'd be the biggest fan. But what we know from study after study after study is that the vast majority of cases in California and across the country take away all rights. They're called full or plenary conservatorships, where we assume that regardless of a person's ability, regardless of a person's desire, regardless of the support a person may have, that person simply loses all of his or her rights. That type of methodology is used in over 90% of cases, leading scholars and researchers to say that what happens in conservatorships is that a third party, someone like Ellen in my example, has incredible power over the most intimate and personal areas of my life, leading to decisions about where I can go and who I can see, whether I can get married and whether I can get health care. And what we know, again, now from going on 50 years of science, is that as good as self-determination is, and it has been proven to increase quality of life, losing it is as harmful as having it is helpful. We know back from the 70s that when people with disabilities lost self-determination, they would feel helpless, hopeless, self-critical. The rest of the sentence on your screen is they will not, quote, behave because they see no point in behaving. And that's not rocket science, is it? If I tell you time and time again that you cannot do something, that you are not worthy of something, that you do not have the right or opportunity to do something, are you feeling particularly motivated to try? What is that going to make you think about yourself and those around you and the world that you live in? Well, we have studies that show that too, that when people with disabilities, particularly people with psychiatric disabilities, lose their right to make choices, what results is they have lower self-esteem, more passive, they feel inadequate, and they're less able to function. So as I and others have said, when we do something and take away rights for someone's quote own good, we might be actually increasing the harm that led us to act in the first place. And here's where it gets scary, because as I said, I have no objection to conservatorship. I know that there are people who are well-meaning who seek conservatorships. I know that there are people who may need limited conservatorships or temporary conservatorships, or in some cases, full conservatorships. What I concern myself with, what we should all be concerned with, are overbroad and undue conservatorships. People whose rights are taken away, who don't need to lose those rights, or who could exercise their rights with a little bit of support. Here's what I mean. Think about the world we live in today. Think about the technology we have. Think about the supports and services we have. Think about the opportunities we've had. Think about the phone you're holding in your hands that I hope you're not looking at right now instead of listening to me. These phones can connect us, not just orally, but with our supporters. With my phone, I can give someone access to my medical records if I want him or her to come to the doctor with me. I can do a 3-way telemedicine appointment to make sure I've got someone there who can help me understand the doctor and the doctor understand me. I can give someone access to my bank account to make sure I'm not overspending and to budget with me. I can set reminders to make sure that I meet my appointments, that I take the medication that I think I need when I need it. All those things that we can do. And as we sit here today in 2021, there are more ways to make more people more independent than ever before. And yet the number of people in guardianship and conservatorship has tripled in just the last 25 years. We've gone from an estimated 500,000 people to 1.7 million people in conservatorship. And before you say it's because we're getting older as a society, we are. According to a study by the National Council on Disability, the vast majority, the fastest growing people going into conservatorship are 18-year-olds with disabilities. An 18-year-old with a disability is more likely to be in a conservatorship than an 85-year-old. And what we know from statistics is that person is more than likely to lose all of their rights going forward. And the research is scary, because what we know is that people who lose rights they shouldn't lose, people who are in overbroad and undue guardianships and conservatorships, people who lose their rights through other methods, people who lose their freedom, people who lose their opportunities, people who lose their right or chances to make choices, have significant negative impacts on their lives. We have evidence that people who lose their self-determination feel less well, do less things, and in some cases live less long. On the other hand, we have decades of studies that say when people do more things, when they make more choices, when they have more opportunity, they have better lives. They're more independent. They are more parts of their community. They are more likely to be employed. They are more likely to be key and integral parts of their medical care. And they are more likely to be able to adjust to increasing healthcare needs and be a voluntary part of their treatment. So we must find a way forward. Because if we know that self-determination is the key to a better life, and if we know that losing self-determination can hurt, what we need to do is find a way. And I think we can all agree on this, because we can all agree on the power of choice. And we can all agree, I hope, on the importance of self-determination. But there's one more thing we have to agree on, is that people need help. Not just people with disabilities. Everyone needs help. Every single day, everyone needs help. I had to email 3 different people just to find a link to join this webinar. We had to have 3 prep sessions just to make sure we could properly advance our slides on this webinar. Help is part of what we all do. So what I think we need to do moving forward, and what I hope the rest of this day is about, are ways to enhance the self-determination independence of people with disabilities, people with psychiatric disabilities specifically, while at the same time making sure that they have the help and support they need to make their self-determination a reality. Because self-determination isn't just you're on your own. It isn't just please go and do well and be self-determined. No, of course not, because we all have supporters in our lives. And that is why I propose this as a way forward: supported decision-making. Supported decision-making is a growing and recognized methodology backed by research that I'm going to tell you about, that can do the things that if you are a professional, you got into this field to do. If you are a parent, you want for your child. And if you are a peer, you want for yourself, because it can keep you in control of your life to the maximum extent possible. increasing your self-determination, giving you access to those positive life outcomes that we have studied for decades, while at the same time making sure that we all have the help we need. So the definition of supported decision-making is on your screen right now. You can see it. You can screenshot it. If you get a copy of this, please feel free to take it. You'll note my name is on it. I am the co-writer of it. Now that you see it, I do hope you'll ignore it, because this to me is an awful definition. I apologize to Dr. Blank, who you're going to hear later, who is my boss, who is the first author of that paper. But I will tell you, I think this is a horrible definition because of all the words. It seems to me to really be trying to impress. So I'm going to skip this page and I'm just going to tell you what supported decision-making is. And the way I'm going to do it is to ask you a question. How do you make decisions? What do you do in your life? What do you do when you go to the doctor and the doctor speaks medical jargon at you? You say, like me, I hope, would you please explain that in plain language? What do you do if, like me, you don't know anything about cars and the mechanic quotes you an outrageous price? What do you do if, like me, one of your children is having difficulties in school or in life and you have a family member who is a psychologist or an educational professional? What do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, what you do is you get help, don't you? You call that person you know. You do that research. My sister, the educational professional, when one of my children is having trouble in school, I give her a call. My buddy who knows about cars, when I need something done to my car and don't know if I should pay for it, I call him. And let me tell you, I ask my doctor tons of questions. Then I go and back and I do research. That's what supported decision-making is. Supported decision-making is getting the help you need when you need it in a way you can understand it so that you can do the things you have to do. And if it sounds familiar, it's because we all do it. And in fact, none of us calls it supported decision-making. We just call it life. But I want you to think about all of the cliches that we have in our lives about supported decision-making, because you've used one of these probably in the last week. Don't go off half-cocked. Don't make a snap judgment. Get a second opinion. Make an informed choice. Or my dad's favorite, measure twice, cut once. They all mean the same thing. Get the help you need to make the decisions you have to make. That is what we all do. So supported decision-making is exactly what we are supposed to do. It's exactly what we are complimented for doing in our jobs. If you're a professional listening to this, I imagine at some point you had to conference with a coworker. At some point you asked a supervisor for advice and the supervisor did what I do, which is to ask you, well, who else have you talked to? Maybe you should do some research. And if you do that, if you're a professional, you probably got a good evaluation, because that's exactly what we're supposed to do. If you are a parent, you have given your child advice time and time again, no doubt, to check up, to review, to get help, to ask for advice, to come to us when you need us. And if you are a peer, you have reached out. I have no doubt that you have reached out to friends, you have reached out to family members. The sad part is if you're a person without disabilities, or as I call it, a temporarily able-bodied person, doing that, reaching out, asking for help, admitting you need help is a virtue. We're complimented for it. We're told we should do that. We're told we should seek help. But for 1,500 years, if you're a person with disabilities, particularly a person with psychiatric disabilities, the second you say, I don't understand, or I need help, or I'm struggling, the culture kicks in. Just like Tristan said, you have a limitation in something, and we're going to assume you can't do anything. So what we need to do is move forward. We need to find a way to ensure, like the Americans with Disabilities Act says, that people with psychiatric disabilities have full and equal rights and full and equal aspects to all parts of life, including decision-making. And the good news is, when it comes to supported decision-making, something else you already know, there's no one way to do it. It's a paradigm, an empowerment. So if you're asking, where's my book? Where's my app? Where's step 1, step 2, and step 3? I have good news. You already know the answer. There isn't one, because you make decisions differently than I do. You need different kinds of help than I do, and you reach out at different times and in different ways than I do. So there are so many ways to empower people to use supported decision-making. There are so many ways to use supported decision-making. Sometimes it's just speaking with someone. I call it a listening ear, a shoulder to lean on, to bounce questions off of, to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and have the right information. Sometimes it's having what I call go-to people. I go to my sister on educational questions. I go to my buddy about car questions. I have someone else I ask about money questions. And we can put that into a support plan. We can put that into an individualized support or waiver plan. We can put that into a power of attorney. And as you're going to hear from Laurie Hallmark coming up next, you can put that into a psychiatric advanced directives where we say, when I need help with this, I want to talk to that person. When I am experiencing this, these are the things that should be done. And by doing that, that one simple act of empowering support, we are saying to people that you do have full and equal access. You may want to have a group of people who works with you, sometimes called a micro board or a circle of support, where I speak with you and I ask you for advice, and people in my life give me their input so I can consider it and do what I want to do with my life. All of the things I've just described to you are supported decision-making, because all of them involve me asking you for support, you giving me information in a way I can understand it, so I can do the things I have to do in my life. So we can all leave this conference here today with the values we heard in that video and the comments we heard on that panel as the biggest advocates for supported decision-making. Really, there are only 3 things we need to know about supported decision-making, and these 3 things will carry through the rest of the day and help us incorporate psychiatric advanced directives. They will help us create self-determination, and every one is easier than the last. First, we all agree, sitting right here today, that everyone has the right to make choices to the maximum of their ability. And that's easy because that's the Declaration of Independence. We hold those truths to be self-evident, that we are all created equal with rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 2, we all agree that I can ask you, Ellen, I can ask you for help doing something without you saying that must mean you can't do it. And that's easy because we are complimented for reaching out for help every day. We are told we should reach out for help every day. And the third one's the easiest still. We all agree that there are as many ways to give and get help as there are people. First thing you try may not work, but haven't you gone to plan B before? Hell, I go to plan Z sometimes. Something we can try. People work differently. People may not succeed the first time you try something. People may even be resistant the first time you try something, but we can continue to work with them, finding what works for them. Something might work. Nothing might work. If nothing works, there's nothing wrong with conservatorship. But 1,500 years of culture are too much. We must stop assuming that difficulty equals impossibility and work to empower. And while there is no one way to do it, there are lots of resources out there that can help you do it. Just some on the screen right now. The American Civil Liberties Union, I worked with them to create an entire guide on creating supported decision-making agreements. You can find it by Googling ACLU and when do I want support. The supported decision-making brainstorming guide can help you have a guided conversation with someone to find out what areas in their life they want support, how they want to be supported, and when they want that support. Because as you heard from Rachel and Tristan and Ellen, this has to start with the person. We can't be telling the person, this is where you're going to get help. We're going to work with that person to find out where they want help. As Ellen has written, when the person is the leader, when the person is steering the process works better. And finally, one called the Setting the Wheels in Motion guide that I co-wrote with a California advocate, a mom who has 3 children with disabilities. And the first part of that guide is all about her journey in working with her children to help them make decisions. But that second part is the key one. There are worksheets that can help you have those conversations, help you and your loved one, your supporter, your family develop that supported decision-making plan. Find out what's important to and for the person, where that person is and where that person wants to go. And if we do that, we will not only be morally correct, because I don't think there's a person here who can doubt that morally choice is the way we can go. We will be scientifically correct. Research and studies support doing this. We know from research, for example, that people with psychiatric disabilities have better outcomes when they are supported They are better able to make decisions. In some cases, they have been found able to have capacity to make decisions when they have support, as opposed to when they do not. And again, not rocket science. There are times when each and every one of us isn't able to make decisions, whether because we're having a bad day or whether we don't know something. And if you want a better commercial than supported decision-making, I can't give you one better than this. There is not a person listening to me, unless you have a medical license, who has the capacity to take care of their medical care without support, because you don't have the ability to diagnose yourself or prescribe medication. But what you do is you get the support of a doctor, you get the support of a medical health personnel who you can talk to, you can describe your situation, and who can tell you, this is what I think you have, and this is what I think you can do. That's supported decision-making. And we know that it works, and we know that it works for people with disabilities. A study just completed that I was one of the co-authors of, what we found, we worked with 10 young adults with disabilities and empowered them to use supported decision-making. We empowered them to make agreements and plans however they wanted. And we followed them for a year. We interviewed them, we interviewed family members, we interviewed their supporters. And here's what we found. We found that people who used supported decision-making were more independent, more self-confident. They were better at making decisions, and they made better decisions. And even in the middle of a pandemic, they said they had better quality of life. And again, I say, if you are a professional, that's why you're in this field. If you're a parent, this is what you dream of for your child. And if you are a peer, this is what you've been looking for your whole life, that they've been telling you they're going to give you, and they haven't. This is a chance for self-determination, for peers to say, this is the kind of life I want to live, the way I want to live it. How can you help me? How can we work together to create that life? Because if we do that, amazing things can happen. The people you're seeing now are all people who were in conservatorships. They were all people who had lost their rights. And they are all people who, through supported decision-making, gained their rights back and are now living independently and successfully. This young woman right here, Takora, was living in a car. Takora could not sign a lease for an apartment because she had a conservator, and the conservator was not around. And we had to fight just to get Takora the opportunity to make decisions and have people in her lives. And after a court case, Takora was free. She has a supporter sitting next to her who helps her through her life. And on a very personal note, one more reason I'm so honored to be working with the people in this project is I had the amazing experience of finding out while speaking on a panel only a couple of weeks ago, mid-presentation, that a young woman I represent in California is, to my knowledge, going to be the very first person who will be freed from a conservatorship because she uses supported decision-making. She will receive her rights back, and she will have the support she needs to make that work. And that's why 13 states, just since 2008, just since I represented Jenny Hatch in the first trial to find that people with disabilities have the right to use supported decision-making, have passed laws recognizing supported decision-making, why there are projects like this across the country that are empowering people with disabilities, and why there are incredible professionals like the next person you're going to hear, Laurie Hallmark, who are working each and every day to empower people with psychiatric disabilities to make their own decisions. The last thing I want to say to you is this. We've had 1,500 years of culture telling people with disabilities they can't do things. That the first feeling is to remove rights. We can change that culture one person at a time, one decision at a time. We can empower one person at a time to do one more thing than they did yesterday, to make one more decision than they had ever made before. And by doing that, we change the world, because we change that person's life and we change every single person that came after them. The very first supported decision-making case I had took a year. The next one took 1 day in court. Another one was simply an agreement because everyone agreed it was the right thing to do. One person at a time, one decision at a time, we change the world, not just for the people we care about, not for the people we support, not for the people we love, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us. And it is my great honor to do that with you. And it was my great pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much.